I feel like an extreme place would be like no trans women in the bathroom ever. That's the extreme position. I'm saying work on your transition, take it as your responsibility and be respectful. And that's the middle ground, right?
She's 100% right. That is the middle ground. Work on your transition. Meet the halfway. It's not that hard. It really is not that hard. Hey, my name is Alex Daly, and today I'm going to watch a Jubilee video. The video is called Trans Conservatives versus Trans Liberals, and it's the middle ground format. And I'm just going to give some of my opinions. Nothing I say is obviously meant to supposed to offend anyone. It's just my beliefs and what I think. So I know the world has been going a little bit crazy, especially since Trump took office. So far, put through I think over 200 different executive orders. I'm actually quite a fan of a lot of the what's called rulings that he's put through, especially the one that is related to gender. I think that 100% there needs to be put a harsh guideline that there's only men and there's only women that is based on your biology at conception. Basically what it's doing, it's just defending women from gender ideology and extremism and restoring biological truth to the federal government, which is actually a really, really good thing when it entails things like taking men out of women's prisons, which is absolutely disgusting that it actually even happens. I know in Australia as well, it is still happening and it is actually given as an option. I do know that a lot of women, trans women who are going through the prison system in Australia, when given the option, do choose to go to the men's prison as they should, but they are only doing so because it looks good for their bail report. It allows them to actually receive less time because they're actually doing it a little bit harder in the men's prison system. And you can actually go online and find heaps and heaps and heaps of information of cases where men being put in women's prisons has led to sexual assault, just straight up assault. It's led to pregnancies continuously, and these poor babies are now being born in the prison system and then put straight into the foster system. It's just really, really appalling, in my opinion. Another issue that was very related to the male and female executive order was in regards to trans youth. There is no such thing as a trans child. There are people who are children and grow up to be trans, yes, but in order for someone to transition, you actually have to go through puberty. You have to go through puberty first. If you don't go through puberty, how do you know that you aren't the gender that you were born? Like, you actually have to develop and become a man or become a woman naturally first in order to see that you are not that gender or don't have comfort in that gender. Trans is something that is actually preventable if you receive therapy for it early on enough in your life to actually prevent that sort of path that you go down. There's actually two factors that you'll find are most common in people who do end up transitioning. Generally, they're on the spectrum and they are also homosexual. It's those two key factors that generally sort of create this little bubble of I don't feel comfortable and I'm not sure why I'm not able to understand my social situations. I'm not sure why I'm not able to make friends, why I feel like an outsider. It can be quite damaging to children when they're quite young, when not treated for gender dysphoria in the right way, which is to not affirm it, which is to sort of encourage them to become the gender that they're born. And it can lead them to doing things like going on puberty blockers, which is just a drug that was made for sexual predators who commit sexual offenses. Also, putting kids on puberty blockers, what it is doing, if you start them on it young enough, which a lot of them are between the ages of 9 to 12, even if they come off the puberty blockers, they will never be able to have sexual gratification when they are fully developed or be able to actually have children. They will be sterilized. That's what essentially puberty blockers are doing. They're sterilizing your children, setting them up for a life where they'll never be able to be sexually satisfied as an adult. Also, the fact that they are getting sex reassignment surgery, which is literally just genital mutilation. It is literally just creating a gash that is going to be for the sole single purpose of one day a man being able to it. And that's just absolutely horrific to be doing to children. It's horrific to do at all. People who have bottom surgery, full stop, the studies show that 10 years down the track, you become 17 times more likely to kill yourself. It's not a surgery that actually creates a real. It is not real. It is this neo that actually has no pleasure. There are lots of people saying that there's these new forms of the surgery where they take a section of your colon and then they use that as the interior of the so that it creates mucus naturally, which is really disgusting. A whole range of problems like sepsis. There's no case that you can find where someone hasn't had a complication from it because it's just a mutilation of your tools. It's wrong. It's just straight up wrong. Being trans should honestly be something that is very, very difficult to go forward with doing. It shouldn't be something that's easy because it is such an irreversible, unchangeable, life-altering decision to make, especially for children. Once you start them on those puberty blockers, they are becoming lifelong medical patients. That is so unfair to do to them. And to think that the kids have this innate sense that they know that they're trans is just not true. It is something that's been indoctrinated into them. In fact, it is something that you'll mostly see in groups of white women doing to their children. It is simply just child abuse. Anyone who's got a trans child should really, really be checked in by what's called the Department of Child Protection. And if it's not the parents, it's the teachers. And you know how it's the teachers? Because they go ahead and they let everyone know themselves on TikTok. They literally post videos where they show that they're taking the children and they're putting them into a little closet area and they're asking them, what gender are you? Are you male or female today? And then they're going and changing them into the appropriate clothing rather than the ones that their parents have brought them to school in. It's essentially woke ideology has become something that is a tool to essentially break up the family unit. It's pushed onto the minds of children through TikTok. Okay, so today I'm going to watch a video from Jubilee. This video is called Trans Conservatives versus Trans Liberals, the middle ground format of their video. Let's dive right in, shall we?
Being a non-binary person that sometimes has the choice to either go into a men's restroom looking like this. So you can look at me looking like this.
It's just interesting that I thought this was a trans debate. That's what I thought.
Non-binary people.
Non-binary people fall under the trans umbrella. Yeah. So I don't know, maybe you could educate yourself a little bit on that.
I think I could educate you.
Maybe then you would figure out,
I think I could educate
you know, what reality is.
Oh, whoa.
Love blow.
It is a safety concern for trans women to share a female restroom. Can the agreeers please?
The first point is it a safety concern for trans women to use the restroom? I wouldn't say that it's a safety concern for trans people to be going into the bathroom, because for me, I classify trans people as someone who is genuinely trying to pass and is trying only for the purpose of becoming like as close as they can with their secondary sex characteristics to become a woman. They're trying to pass, they're not doing anything that's out of the ordinary. They're literally just, well, I mean, being trans is pretty out of the ordinary, but they're not what I would call an AGP, which is an autogynephiliac. Autogynephiliac is a man who gets off to the idea of being a woman, being as a woman, is just sexually by the idea of being a woman. And generally these people who are in the late 30s, 40s, who are also originally attracted to women. So they're not someone who is born homosexual or is homosexual. They are someone who is heterosexual and becoming the thing that they are sexually aroused by. It is just perverted behavior. And for those people to be in the bathroom, 100%, that is a problem, because that's where you get guys standing around with people creeping, peeping toms, perverted behavior. Just disgusting. Those people are an issue. People who are non-binary, I think, sort of fall more to the category of someone who's on autogynephilia, even though they're not someone who is trying to become a woman, which is what trans people are trying to do. They're trying to become as best they can passable as a woman. But people who are non-binary, they are also getting off on the idea of making someone just be uncomfortable.
This kind of behavior is never tolerated in Boracua.
They're trying to make people uncomfortable. That's the whole premises of it. They want to be different. They want to be unique. They're trying to stand out. They're not trying to pass. They're not trying to assimilate into the opposite gender.
They put you in jail.
They're just trying to stand out. And that's a problem.
Right away. No trial, no nothing.
It is a safety concern for women.
Right to jail.
For young girls, it is just really, really perverted.
Right to jail. Right away.
I would never use a women's changing room. That is a place that is not for me. That is not in any sense an okay place for any trans person, for any autogynephiliac person to ever be in. I can't think of any reason why you would need to be using a change room, because generally you'll think places like swimming pool. Trans people don't go to the swimming pool because it's a concern for them that they're not going to pass, because you have to be naked. Yes, and it's also more of an issue, the fact that it's like you don't want men around women when they're most vulnerable, changing their clothing in the changing room. But it's also, for the an actual trans person, it's a place that they don't want to be anyway. No trans person who's actually trans wants to be in a change room. If they want to be in there, they're not trans, they're an autogynephiliac, they're a perv.
Believe it or not, jail, right away.
When it comes to going into the bathroom, you don't get to do that, even if you are trans, straight away.
Because of jail.
As you start transitioning, that is not something you just get to do. That's something that you earn based on how much you work at your transition and then how passable you become. Unfortunately, if you don't become passable, then that means that you generally won't be able to go into the women's bathroom, in my opinion, and you shouldn't be allowed in there.
Also jail.
And generally, if you're a trans person, you understand that and you respect women more than you are worried about your own insecurities about being trans. You'll go to a disabled toilet or a family toilet. You'll go to a toilet that is away from other people. That is your solution. Until they make, say, a unisex toilet that is just for trans people, but then again, what you're doing then is sort of just, you're shoving all the trans people and all the autogynephiliacs into that one toilet, which is then becomes a problem for trans people. It's your possibility, and possibility is just not also how you look, it's how you carry yourself, it's the energy that you put out, it's how you're perceived by people. It's generally more of an innate thing. I've always been told that I carry myself like a woman, like I've always been very feminine, I've always been very, very feminine, but I've done a lot of work. Skip the ads.
It depends.
Yes. So I think that to start it off though too is it's not necessarily saying that trans women. It all comes down to self-ID. When we moved into a self-ID process, there are a lot of people, there are a lot of men, just simply self-IDing into being trans women to utilize the female restroom and to harm women.
Or just be there. They're getting arousal from just being there.
You know, there was a photo, or it was a video that went viral, I think like just 2 weeks ago, with some like whole man with a boner in the women's restroom. And there's just some poor woman filming it. Like, am I just supposed to like accept that this is here? So I think there's levels to it. I think that trans women who are actually trans, you know, we're talking gender dysphoria, transitions, making the effort, you know, probably once you reach a certain point in your transition where you can actually assimilate within that space and not cause a disruptance, that would probably be the ideal time to start doing that, right? Whereas, you know, a cross-dresser who is emboldened to, in this current climate, say that they're trans because now anything is trans if you say so, that person should probably stay absolutely out of women's restrooms, because you're there to get your rocks off and the women are there to take a poop and a pee. So it's not the same. And you know, I really empathize with women who, you know, have an issue with it. And I can probably hear some women commenting, well, how do I know the difference between a fetishist and a real trans person? It's hard. It's hard. However, that's the only nuance that I know to give to it, which is there's different reasons people are trans, and some people really are trans because they're horny, and some people are trans because they really felt that way from, you know, a young age or whatever.
See, I agree to an extent. Like, when you go to transition, and this is a fairly universal experience, you know, once you get to a certain point of passing, that's about the time that you would start going into the other bathroom, as opposed to not make the same sex uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Once you reach that point in your transition, a lot of things change, but you know, you start to see things from another perspective. You start to see things from the perspective of a cis person.
Yeah.
And I actually offer some solutions to this, because I believe the free market can handle all of this stuff, because in government-run and government-funded buildings, there should always be a third space for us to use. And I do. When I go to the Capitol and stuff like that, I always use third spaces. But I think that private property owners can make the rules for their establishment and figure out how to enforce those rules.
I mean, I wouldn't say third spaces for trans people.
Exactly. Like, we're in a state right
general.
now. We're in a state right now where you have to allow anybody to use whatever restroom they want.
If you're a decent human being, you do what causes the least disturbance. So for example, I filmed a YouTube video a few years ago where I entered a men's restroom just because I was responding to comments who were like, well, maybe you should use a men's restroom if you really feel like the way you feel. And so I said, okay, let's do it. Let's put a camera. And I was kicked out within seconds of the entire establishment, and it was a whole ruckus. So that's what I mean by, if you're a decent person, you do what causes the least amount of problems for people around you. And if you're, you know, a moral person, you're going to be conflict avoidant in general when it's something like that, right? It's like, what's the point of causing issues for anyone, especially if you're really just trying to pee?
Just put
get
your
it
head
done.
down, go in, get out.
Right.
Can the
Alrighty. I 100% agree with pretty much what everyone just said then. I love Sarah. She's great as well. She's really, really, really well-informed, conservative. Well, I would say she's more middle, but she's definitely, when compared to some of the extreme leftists, I would say, yeah, she definitely falls on a more conservative standpoint, I guess, in comparison. She's really well-informed. She's was in the military. She's really great. Blair, she's always on top of it, though. I love Blair. She's good.
I want to comment on Blair's point. The one thing I kept hearing through all of the nuance is passability. Because ultimately, when we talk about passability, it determines how you get harassed in the bathroom. Because honestly, if you don't look so passable or whatnot, people are going to say, oh, that's a man with a dress on, and then there's going to be discourse. But the reality of it is, honestly, who cares who's trans and who's cis going in the bathroom? You should be minding your own business, being able to pee and do your business in peace, for the most part. That conversation around...
All right. I'm just pausing, but Passability is your own responsibility as a trans person. You are the one responsible for that. If you don't pass and people are misgendering you, that's no one else's fault. That's your own fault. You have to work on that. That's something for you to work on to get to a point where you are passable. Yeah.
That conversation around this man with a boner on or whatever like that, I saw that picture and I thought to myself, that's really a right-wing talking point and conservative propaganda because that's their ideology.
How is it
when it
was a
comes
thing
to
that
trans?
happened.
I'm speaking. That's their ideology when it comes to trans. It's because conservatives have a basic level understanding of what transness is in the first place. And with all due respect, I do not think any of you are basic, but they use you as the baseline to amplifying this propaganda.
How is it propaganda if it's a thing that really happened? It was caught on video. Like it was an actual occurrence. It wasn't staged. It happened, and that's not the only. It's not an isolated incident.
But that's not enough for me to say because actors can do that. Who knows? They could have been an actor trying to make a point against trans people. But this has always been our battle. It's just like from what I just heard you were saying with your talking points, because I did understand what you were saying. I just got the word passability out of there, and
Which I didn't say that word at all.
No,
Yeah,
I'm saying
he
that word.
said passability.
I'm saying
she didn't say it. He
I'm-
did. And the
I'll
problem,
say it.
the left.
Okay, I can't.
The
I
problem
couldn't
with
hear.
the-
I just couldn't hear back there.
The
But no, what I was
liberals,
saying
the
was
liberals always use the.
Yeah. No, what I'm saying is I'm not saying you said that word. What I was getting out of what you were saying, the one word that was coming to me was passability. This is Blossom saying it. And so passability politics is really a thing in our trans community, especially when we come to the debate of restrooms.
Well, you can say it's politics, but actually it's just real life, right? It's just about
Correct.
where
I
you're
agree.
able to assimilate to and where you're not. And I think one of the biggest problems in the trans community is the community by and large has seemed to reject assimilation and seems hell-bent on...
That's not true.
I think it's absolutely true, which is you see people talking about how you don't need to work on your transition at all to enter women's restrooms. And I think that that is so selfish.
That's pause. 100%. That is just part of being non-binary, part of being a perv, in my opinion. That's all that is. They have so much entitlement. In my opinion, it's just straight narcissism. It's narcissism and being perverted. When you're not wanting to assimilate, you're not trans. It's a binary. You're going from one to the other. There's no in between. There is I'm trying, but there's no I'm trying, and that's good enough to get into the bathroom. No. You have to pass. You have to not be making people uncomfortable. Like, if you're a good person, like Blair said, like, then you wouldn't be trying to make someone uncomfortable. It's about the 50% of the population who you're trying to assimilate into. You've got to make sure that your priorities are about making them most comfortable before you, if you want to be a part of their group, you have to sort of do what they want first. Like, it's pretty simple. Alrighty.
So it's so disregarding of women who may or may not feel
But
uncomfortable.
the trans woman experience is not monolithic. So who are we
I
to
never said it
police transness? Why are we policing other people's transness
I'm
and
just
how they
listening to
show
women.
up?
We have to
But why
protect
are we-
women.
Why are y'all policing though? That's what I don't understand.
But you're using
I-
words
it's
that we're not
policing.
using. It's not policing. We're listening
is
to
policing.
women, and if you have 50%, we won't say 50%, but if you have a large chunk of the population of women saying that they are uncomfortable with a certain thing, a good person leans in and listens.
So why
they
are
don't
you
just
not listening
reject
to
it.
other trans women, Blair?
I
think
do
that's-
all day. I am right now.
But you didn't, and I'm not trying to be combative or whatever like that. I'm just trying to figure out, you know what I'm saying, what the middle ground would be between you and I, because you said one side and that's great, but what about the side of trans women? If we're not bringing both sides into this conversation,
Here's what I would say
then
then.
it is unbalanced.
Here's what I would say then, because I do understand both sides. I didn't, I'm almost a decade into my transition, which means I was one time a year in, 6 months in, 2 months in. So I understand that, but I also knew at the very beginning of my transition that if I'm not at a place physically where I'm not making people feel uncomfortable, or I'm making people uncomfortable, then
Right.
that's on me. That's my
Correct.
responsibility to make sure that I'm going places a certain way to make sure that they're comfortable.
Because it's for
It
your
was my
safety
respons-
also, too, right?
Well,
Would you also say
can-
that you're safe?
Well,
your
I
safety
know that
plays a part.
you seem to be looking at through the lens of always trans being the priority, and I'm looking at it through the lens of women being the priority here. There's
But
plenty of situations.
Why? I just want to know
Because
why
it's them who
around
would
that.
fall victim to not actual trans women, as I said, but people posing as trans women.
have
People
an
who are
But trans
actually
women are
trans.
also victims of that as well.
I'm sorry. I would love it if the two of you have said your piece And I would love to hear.
Yeah, everybody.
Yeah,
else
yeah. I
needs
just
to
want to
talk.
make this
Nobody
point.
else is
I just want to
talking.
make this point as well. But trans women also experience violence and also need
No
that
doubt.
protection. And so that's the
No
thing.
doubt.
Like it should be an even playing field. I'm not saying you're wrong, but what I'm saying is I would like to challenge you to expand to make sure you're being inclusive of both sides or whatever. Because we have to have these important conversations between cis women and trans women.
I mean, I
and I'm
think-
just gonna say, and I'm not gonna just say cis women. I'm gonna say women, biological women. I want to make it inclusive of everyone.
I think the middle ground though is, and I feel like I'm not coming at this from an extreme place. I feel like an extreme place would be like no trans women in the bathroom ever. That's the extreme position. I'm saying work on your transition, take it as your responsibility and be respectful. And that's the middle ground, right?
This is a
She's 100% right. That is the middle ground. Work on your transition. Meet the halfway. It's not that hard. It really is not that hard.
This is a self-preservation issue, right? So if somebody's in the bathroom and they have a boner, that looks bad on all of us. And when people when our community's not calling that out and not saying that this is
But
wrong,
I'm just,
No,
to
I
your
get
point,
it.
how many cases has that occurred?
it happens. It happens a lot. We see it's happening all the time.
No, I
There
have
are-
to
there
actually
are-
see,
there are-
I have to
there
actually
are
see
Twitter
data.
accounts.
I'm sorry, because I just want to make the sure the back and
Yeah.
forth goes everywhere.
I mean, there's Twitter accounts with millions of followers that show this stuff.
All right. And you know what I want to say is back when I first started transitioning even, this stuff didn't happen. I can say that it wasn't a massive concern. Like no one was talking about it at least. Maybe they should have been if it was happening, 100%. But it was not really like a big thing. This was not even a big issue 7 years ago. Now it is, because that self-ID thing that they were just talking about, 100%. Self-ID is one of the worst things that happen to being trans. You should have to go through a lot of psychiatry in order to be able to get your diagnosis, and then you should have to be on hormones for like 3 years or like something, I don't know, some given amount of time, and actually have to show that you've put in effort to transition and actually have tried to become passable and assimilate. If we can create like a system where there is a proof system where you can show that you've done this, this, and this, and that you're doing everything you can, because guess what happens when like pervs go on hormones? It castrates them. They are no longer interested in sex. They're no longer interested in all that perversion anymore, and the first thing they do is they stop taking them because they're like, no, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to become the thing I'm sexually by, and in doing so they lose their sexual arousal.
And so we're showing that these types of things do actually cause harm to trans people. So if you're looking at it at a trans lens and to say, what are we doing? We need to combat that stuff and come together to combat that
It does
stuff.
not encompass the entire trans experience.
No,
and
you're
that's all
right.
I just want to say.
Yeah, I think I see a lot of different points from everybody here. Honestly, like I can understand like how some women may feel unsafe with men in the restroom. Men, when I say men, I mean men. I'm not talking about trans women. So being a non-binary person that sometimes has the choice to either go into a men's restroom looking like this. You can look at me, looking like this.
It's just interesting. I thought this was a trans debate. That's
Oh,
what I
don't
thought.
even.
Non-binary
That's what I
people,
thought.
non-binary
I
people
will
are part of the
follow the
trans
trans
I will say
umbrella.
that.
No, they don't.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe you could educate yourself.
Pause. The trans umbrella. One of the stupidest things I've ever heard. There's no such thing as a trans umbrella. Being trans means you're trying to become the opposite gender. 1, 2, male, female. That's binary. That's two. There's two things. Non-binary means you literally are not trying to transition from one to the other. You're literally trying to just be a nuisance and a menace to society. That's all you're trying to do. You're trying to be a clown who wants to be a victim so that everyone has pity and feels sad for you. That's all you are.
A little bit
I
on
think
that,
I could
and maybe
educate
then you would figure out.
I think I could educate
you know what
right?
the reality is
I'm
and what
sure
trans
there's
actually
a
means.
non-binary Jubilee episode.
Wow, it's
Well, because it's not a debate about who is really trans and who is not.
It can be.
We're talking about
Maybe it should be.
restrooms. As a trans non-binary person, when I go into a place that only has men's and women's restrooms, and I'm dressed like this, my choice to go into the men's restroom at that point puts me in danger.
6 years ago when I've transitioned almost 8 years ago, but
Wait, I'm just going to pause for a second. It puts him in danger, 100%. But guess what? That's a choice that you're making to dress up like that. You can, like, on off day, like you want to dress like a man, like whatever it is that you're trying to do in your non-binary journey, you don't have to do any of that. It's not part of a mental illness. It's not part of anything. Being trans is a mental illness, and people hate when you say that because it's like they think it looks down on it. But you know what else is a mental illness? Having anxiety, having depression, and those are so common. We don't need to have an issue when it comes to having gender dysphoria underneath mental illness. That shouldn't be an issue. But you know who doesn't have mental illness? This person. And if they do, you know what it is? It's narcissism. That's all it is.
Years ago, it was never an issue for me to use the women's room. Girls would literally drag me in there with them and say, girl, you need to be in our bathroom. And I was like, I felt uncomfortable back then. I don't pass. I know I don't pass. So that's a me problem. And I'm not going to turn my fear of being attacked in the men's room into a woman's problem. It's still a me problem. So I need to work on myself. And
Such a good way to put that.
Does it suck? Yes, it sucks. I don't pass. I know I don't pass. But I still respect women enough, and some trans people aren't capable of handling themselves against
the way that she just looked at Blossom.
I'm confident in my ability to do that. And not everybody can. I get that. But it's just now, 6 years ago, I used to use the women's room. Now I don't, because women have spoke out. They've come out and said, we're not comfortable. There's too many self-ID'd people out there just taking advantage. And I choose to use the men's room to protect them.
I can definitely actually almost empathize with a lot of trans women and their experience in the bathroom, and a lot of the turmoil with going in, and especially with passability. But the layer that I feel like in the conversation that's missing here is actually trans men, and also the fact that I was born biologically female, and a lot of the things that trans women experience of violence in the bathroom is what I experienced as a child. So the reason why my education here is not necessarily to create an idea that I need to conform to Eurocentric standards. Myself, I'm a 6 foot tall trans man, size 13 shoe.
Wait. Eccentric standards. I would say the only one with eccentric standards is that non-binary fella. Or maybe it's Blossom too. Blossom's got some eccentric standards. But I don't think that civilization classifying what is a man and what is a woman is eccentric standards. I think they're pretty fucking simple standards of what they are.
All trans man, size 13 shoe. So I don't fit into the Eurocentric standards of what a woman is, and I never did as a child. I was, bullied relentlessly for this and isolated from many spaces. So this discussion about trans women being in the restroom also affects biological women, because guess what? Biological women come in all shapes and sizes. There are, a lot of lesbian women that deal with this issue that I've related with and empathize, because we both get pulled out of the restroom and thrown, and guys try to beat us up because we're in a restroom with women. And then on top of it, to add that layer that it's not even being discussed in any mainstream, that this is just completely wiped out, and that you're standing up for women, but you're not standing up for women children. You're not standing up for biological females that are children. You're only standing up for what really affects you. And it's kind of sad that the idea that passability is you need to work on your transition. A lot of folks, especially in our community, have no access to finances, resources, jobs, to even get their foot in the door, to get access to hormones. So you're putting all of these barriers just for them to be able to go to the restroom, which is a natural thing that we all have to do. So what do I need to do? Piss outside? Because that's how I was treated my entire...
Pause. I would say if you're going through things like homelessness or struggling in poverty or whatnot, like I can relate. I've been homeless before. I was homeless for a period of 6 months in my life. Horrible situation, really, really difficult thing to get out of, but I did it. All good now. But I would just say that maybe transitioning to the opposite gender is something that you put aside and you get on with your life. You get on and you build your life back to the way you want it. And then when you have the resources, when you do have the resources, that's when you try and transition. It should not be a priority to transition. It is not, it's a priority to transition if you are transitioning, then yes, make that a priority. But if you're in turmoil, if you are lacking the resources, pop it on the table and work on your life. Get yourself in order, get your things together, get your house, get your everything that you need to do sorted. It can take a while, it does. It's not an easy thing to do. But you know what's like even more difficult? Trying to deal with building your life again, but also trying to transition at the same time. Like, what the Put it away. Put it on the table and keep it as a future goal. Get your life in order. Get off the drugs. Get somewhere safe. Get your resources. Get a job. Make some money. Get your things in order, And then when you're more clear-headed and you've got your things in order, and there are resources out there that you can use when you are, like, obviously homeless. You can get mental health resources. You can get gift packages. I know they do somewhere in King's Cross. They give you like shampoo and conditioner and body wash and toothpaste and toothbrush. Use all the resources that are available to you to get your life in order. And then once you have your own resources, then transition. Simple as that. It's really, really not that difficult. And if you are still thinking about prioritizing transitioning when you are in that space, maybe the first thing you should do is go see a doctor and get that doctor to sort of like help guide you on the best path. And not one of those affirming doctors, because affirmation therapy is one of the sickest things in the world, especially in America, where there was a period of time, I don't know if it's still the case, but where it was illegal for them to sort of not affirm if you were worried about your gender and you were like considering being trans. They could only affirm that decision for you. There was nothing else they could do. You should always make sure that your goals are not just the essential things. Your goals should be something higher than what is essential. So that way, even if you fail at reaching your goal, you always will, you'll at least sort of like land on having the essentials. So what you can do is you can use transitioning as your peak goal, and then on your way to do that, you sort of achieve getting a house, getting a job, and getting your life in order.
That's how I was treated my entire childhood.
I just feel like when this whole topic comes up, like it obviously goes back to like there's dudes like jerking off in the bathroom, and like to me, like when I hear that, I'm like, okay, like, but that's not trans women. So when we talk about this conversation,
not wrong,
and it seems like the fear is like literally cisgender straight men who are being creeps, and what sucks is cis straight men can be like creepy, and then it's like trans women, trans men are like paying the price for that.
Yeah,
and I
100%.
feel like, you know what, that's what's really hard about it, is because then I think people get the idea, or some people have the belief trans women are just like, they're just men in dresses, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, like, for so many...
You can't let the worry that someone's going to perceive it wrong as a reason to still not sort of focus on protecting women and keeping that a priority, because just because it's politically inconvenient, we can't be doing that.
Many trans women and so many trans men, the safest place for them is the bathroom that aligns with their gender. And if you go to a place where it's illegal to do that, or you have to go and like, what's your ID or like your birth certificate, it puts you in an objectively unsafe situation. And for me, like, I'm like, if I walk in the women's room, I mean, I know I like look like a lot, like I look 12, but like I feel like someone would be like, get out of here, you know what I mean? But like, that's the vibe. Like, I think you got to remember, like, when we're talking about it and we're talking about like these creepy dudes like in the bathroom.
Here's the middle ground. Here's the middle ground. Y'all ready? We're gonna be so happy with this. This is the middle ground. We all actually agree. It's men that are the problem. Yep. It's not trans women, real trans women. However, the problem is our community has really eroded any barriers to actually being trans, in the sense of your average cross-dresser can identify as a trans woman.
But then it's not a trans woman.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way. I feel that way as well. I agree with you wholeheartedly. However, with the state of the political correctness within the trans community, you can't really say that. Like that person
is this person saying
and
they're
self-ID.
No,
they say that they're trans, but they're a cross-dresser.
I actually do agree with you, Blair, 100%.
I take my back.
Wow.
That's one of those things. Yeah, I told you. I'm
Let's
really
go.
like that.
Oh my God.
And the reason why I say that is because sometimes when we self-identify, some people can take advantage of that. And that is something, unfortunately, that we cannot control. But we have to combat it with facts, with research, and with the information that is presented in front of us. It seems like we're the ones that's teaching everybody else, because we live in a predominant cis world. We're teaching them about us. And I just really think we cannot afford to be intellectually dishonest about our experiences as trans people.
There is something that I think we can do. There's solutions to this. Like I do think that something like you have to be on hormones or something like that for 2 years or something before you can even change your ID, like across the board. That would eliminate the cross-dressers from being able to go there, because then you can say, hey, my ID says this, and you can, and so it shows that you've actually taken steps. It's not about passability, it's about how long you've actually been taking the steps to transition.
I support the transgender.
Okay. Well, that was the end of that one. I think that we didn't really find I guess, you know what? Blair found a middle ground. So did Sarah. I think that some people on a certain side were trying to make it that there was more discourse than there really was. I think that, everyone agrees men are the issue. In this instance, I don't think men are always the issue. I think men get a bad rap. But men who are pretending to be women, as a cross-dresser, as Blair said, or men who are just simply like autogynephiliac, which is kind of the same thing, I think they're the problem. And as much as the Liberals don't want to like admit that those men are also claiming to be trans and that they're actually accepting them into their like little group of like the LGBT A, B, C, D, E, F, G, they actually are doing so, and they're giving them shelter. They're protecting them. And that's wrong, obviously. The next segment is, it's okay for minors to get top surgery. Wrong.
Exclusive prompt.
It's okay for minors to get top surgery.
Really?
You guys waited on that?
That's pretty violent.
I feel like the vibe is like, I like as someone who had top surgery and went on hormones, like it's a very emotionally intense experience. I think in terms of like minors getting surgery, like the reason why I'm not like no to that is because I feel like maybe someone's like 17 or something. I honestly feel like it is a really intense surgery, but I feel like if somebody's like 17 or like late 16 and like feels like it's right for them, I mean like people are really different. I know for me, like top surgery when I was like 16 would have been like so good and it would have literally like saved my spinal cord from like binding all the time. That's why I'm like, yeah, like I feel like in instances like it can
Pause. So to see how there's almost like a bit of a crossover to like self-harm, like binding is what like trans men do to like pull down their breasts and like flatten them to make it look more like a chest. There is a difference between transitioning and getting affirmative surgery or whatever, and then there's self-harm. And when it comes to like binding, or when it comes to getting bottom surgery or top surgery in many cases, when people are genuinely they aren't actually trans, that's crossing the line of like self-harm. It's sort of like getting an anorexic person and telling them, you know what, you could lose some more weight. Let's help you get there.
So I'm not a trans man, so I don't have the experience or whatnot, but I do think that it has to be done safely. There is a process when it comes to having these types of gender-affirming surgeries. You know what I'm saying? Talking with your parents and then going to endocrinologists and going through therapy to make sure this is right for you. People have a choice to their autonomy. Now, I know that everybody does not, but those that do or whatnot should choose with the right medical education.
Yeah.
They should choose with safety and with full understanding of what is a benefit and what may not be a benefit.
I agree with a caveat that there does need to be some sort of process, which there is, by the way, in place.
Yes, absolutely.
Sometimes does it slip through? Yes, things happen because again, as I said earlier, this is a big world. But to again, negate people the ability to walk through a door that you have walked through, I'm gonna say this again, and then close it behind you, is a little bit of a slap in the face for anybody who's seeking transition.
Yeah.
And as somebody who has experienced top surgery and also waited quite a bit of time, a lot of severe damage actually was created to my rib cage that my wife, who is half my size, actually has the same size rib cage in the back as mine. And these are permanent damage to my body because I binded for about 8 years, and there's
again, more self-harm. Like, I wish that these people had therapy, like, at the time, or some sort of, like, some sort of support system, rather than obviously causing damage to the body and self-harm in that way. Like, that's unfortunate.
even still issues that I have with breathing and certain issues that I face that, you know, unfortunately, if I had that surgery a lot earlier, I would have a better posture. I'd have a lot of pain that is not within my body that I have to deal with on a daily basis, while simultaneously the idea that, you know, I get maybe under 16 top surgery would be something that would possibly even make me a little uncomfortable, but I also know that I was homeless at 16, paying my own rent, and left my home at 16 and had to live my life as an adult very early. So I was able to make those decisions for myself, but I think it's weird that others can't seem to see that I could make a medical decision for myself when I had to physically take care of myself. And I look at some of these younger kids, and there's a sense of jealousy there and excitement for them at the same time, because they now have access to memories and being in the space and being in a comfortable body that, you know, I had a lot of isolation growing up in my childhood because I didn't feel comfortable to present in a female space or a male space. I was isolated constantly from school, from the outside world, from my family. And my transition, my top surgery has done nothing but take physical pain off my body, especially with as large-chested as I was, and having to bind for as many years as I did.
I don't think any minor should be having life-altering elective surgery or life-altering elective medicalization, period. And so when I work on bills across the country that do ban this for minors, there's a couple things I point out. I point out that I don't think a 16-year-old female who wants breast implants should be able to get that either. When we look at what we allow minors to do, like surgeries and stuff like that, they're not life-saving. They're not, if you don't get it, you're not going to die. It's not like getting, like having appendicitis and having to get your appendix removed or anything like that. It's elective. I think that's the key point here.
Agreed.
My thing about surgery, I'm actually vehemently against surgery, like all of it, top surgery, bottom surgery, all of it. Particularly because you need your genitals. Like, it's just that simple. You have these people now who have non-functioning fake penises and vaginas that, you know, you've had issues like, for instance, Richie had where like your urethra folds in half and then you can't pee no more.
This is about
are you against top surgery too? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just surgery in general. I don't think that that's necessarily like you said, it's not like you have appendicitis. It's not like you've got like a bone spur. It's, you know, like you don't.
I disagree with that because I was
surgery,
in physical pain, and the moment that I got that top surgery, the pain was alleviated.
Well, that's not.
Let's be honest for a second. I'm sure you felt a fair bit of pain when you move your breasts. Like, maybe we're talking about emotional pain. I don't know.
That means you need a breast reduction, my friend.
Oh.
No, it's just binding, dude. Binding goes
in
crazy.
general,
I mean, I binded
some
for 8
issues.
years. I know, like it sucks.
I know, but like if you just keep binding, like honestly, like my ribs are like, I'm like, ew, I hate my ribs. Like they're all like messed up.
Is that an
your
issue
body
with
type.
safety of binding though? I'm actually curious
Yeah,
about
like
this.
honestly,
Is the
but
safety
the
of,
thing is
of
too,
how they
like
teach you to
I
bind?
think it comes with like the size of your chest. So like I had a big chest, so like
Same.
I had it was the only way. You know what I mean?
Same.
And I did try and like bind like safely, and I did buy like reputable like binder brands, but it is a lot when you're doing it for a really long time
I
and
used to wear
also
it for
like
3 days straight.
I know, me too. Like, and that's what's like you're not supposed to.
Was
but like,
your doctor telling you that that's not safe because you're not even supposed to wear
Yeah,
it
of
24
course.
hours?
My doctor's
straight,
old
right?
school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, and I
6
did
to
have
8
to go
hours is-
through like for top surgery and testosterone. Like I had to go through like a really big process, and I think that's my thing is like instead of an age thing, I think there's like there should be a process. You should have to like live as that gender and be seeking care and be having like a therapist for long term and a psychiatrist for long term and an endocrinologist for long term, and like it's really like specific to the person, and I think would be like really rare anyway. But that's just my stance.
That I agree with to an extent.
This is definitely the prompt that I am the most passionate about because I think there are few things more vile, more irresponsible, more, dangerous than saying a child can consent to permanently removing a body part that serves an extremely important function. Detransitioners all over the country can never breastfeed their children if they can even have them, because if they did other things, that can stop them from having kids at all, right? The idea that a child can consent to a sex change, to gender-affirming surgery, if you believe that, there's really nothing that you can believe they can't consent to, right? Because that's pretty extreme. That's a permanent body modification under the best circumstances. So you want to move aside all the complications, all the things you can't do, the sterilization, not being able to feed your kids. You can even set that aside. Just the permanent body modification, I mean, you have to be so demented to believe that a child fully understands. I heard a few conversations about, well, if the child fully understands, they don't. They don't, because they're children.
I'm
That's like how
21
being a
and I still
child
don't
works.
understand.
17-year-old, like if a 17-year-old's like living as male for like 5
The
years.
prompt was
it's
about
like,
minors, and
Yeah, but a
12-year-olds
17-year-old
are
is a
getting
minor.
top surgery. So it's easy to say, well, if it's 17-year-olds, okay, well.
In my state, that's actually
There's a
legal
nuanced
age.
conversation about even 17-year-olds, I guess, because the age of consent in some places is lower, but that's not what's happening, right? It's 12-year-olds.
When we talk about minors, it's like, what
In fact, that's actually happening in Australia. Search it up.
age range are we really talking about here?
Anyone
because
under
the thing
18.
because the thing is, when we talk about detransitioners or whatnot, all I hear is a lot of regret, right? Regret that they got these surgeries, regret of the complications, regret, and that's fine. I'm not taking away anybody's experience because these things do happen. But let's also remember, again, there is a process. Now, I have a lot of empathy for those detransitioners that have gone through the process and they are suffering.
But
I
it's
do
not
have
just
empathy.
Studies show that 90% plus, I think it's actually more like 99% plus, kids who start to transition, even just socially or medically or whatever, all grow out of it. All would have grown out of their gender dysphoria, and now they have to detransition, and they are living with the effects of the surgeries, the hormones, all that trauma on their bodies for the rest of their lives. Some of them never be able to have an orgasm. Some of them will never be able to have, a lot of them will never be able to have children. And not to also mention like the, not embarrassment, but sort of, yeah, I guess embarrassment of like having to go back on it. Having to tell everyone, actually, you know what? No, I'm not trans. I'm not, I'm actually, I am the gender I was born. And generally like the community, like I've met a couple of detransitioners, their community shun them. They shut you out, so you haven't got the support anymore from the community that you were a part of for a bit. And parents often, if they were the ones to push the transitioning, like they also like cut contact as well. Like it's really, really sad. It's just medical malpractice, and it's going to be the biggest class action lawsuit of the century. You can bet on that.
But it's
do
not
have
just
empathy for
detrans
that.
people. It's
But
not just detrans
But that's where
people.
I'm just talking about in the conversation, for this particular conversation. And I understand what you're saying, because you're absolutely right. There are more people.
Even
that are
among
doing that.
adults, we all
But-
do different things in
but-
our transition. Some of
correct.
us want bottoms, some of us don't. Some of us want tops, some of us don't.
I
So
understand,
you
but-
need a lot of time as an adult to figure out what you want to do.
But see, the thing is, though, some adults don't even understand what they want to do.
Exactly.
So that's the kind of
Pause. She just went against her whole point. Okay. Blossom is another.
the kind
So
of the
how can a
thing.
child?
But
I
see,
wanna-
children,
I wanna touch
wait a
on
minute,
one
let's
thing
not,
you said.
Different
let's
fucking
not
planet.
underestimate the power of these kids today, okay? They are very much more educated because they have much more resources and access than we did
Wow.
coming up. So let's be
So
very
they're
clear about
advanced
that.
and they can
when
consent.
we talk
Who
about
else says that?
detransitioners, that has been the main topic here or whatnot, because we
But
want to
it's
bring
not now.
detransitioners in to the room, so there's a space. Thank you.
To your point about the reason why I'm against it is because, like you said, the children need to go through the proper steps, the parents, the doctors, but in the state of California, if you, as a parent, tell your minor, no, you're not getting this, I'm not affirming your gender, I'm taking your kids away, and California is going to raise your kids for you. So
Canada
how's
too.
that?
Canada too.
That's not right.
We also know that like all those safeguards that you're talking about, they're not
Disgusting.
Yeah, that's
They're
what
not
I'm saying.
happening at all.
California will
and we,
take your
and we
kids.
we know because there was a whistleblower out of St. Louis, and this isn't some conservative whistleblower. She was married to a trans man, and she considers herself queer. So she blew the whistle and said that they had an in-house doctor. If you couldn't find a affirming therapist to sign off on the form, they would pencil whip it.
But do you believe that it should happen? Do you believe there should be a process when it comes to medical transition?
No,
We have to
there's no
stop-
right
so-
process for
yeah.
kids to hack
Oh,
off
no, I
their
was asking
breasts.
her, honey. I'm sorry.
No,
I was
no.
asking
Well,
her.
I
No.
answered because
No,
I'm
you
here in
don't.
the room.
She's
so.
not wrong.
Okay, thank you.
I feel like personally, like if we're talking about like a 12-year-old getting top surgery, like to me that's just like medical malpractice. Because I know for me, like to get top surgery, like I can only get it at 18 because my insurance covered it at 18. But I had to start that process like long before. Like even hormones was a long process. So I think there's like an area of literal like medical malpractice because no like kid at that age should be getting that in my opinion because you do not know. But I do think there are instances where like a 16 or 17-year-old like could get it. And I don't know if that means like banning like below 16 or like whatever, but.
So in the UK, it was the, I can't remember what it was. It's the reason why they're shutting down the Tavistock Clinic in the UK though, is because they found that when you start a child on hormone, or on puberty blockers, then hormones, it leads to, it's basically a foregone conclusion that they're gonna end up having surgery. It puts them on a path to, it's a sunk cost fallacy.
I just, again, I don't understand this obsession with other
Obsession.
people's children.
It's about caring about kids.
I'm talking. Oh my God.
It's
Well, I'm going to cut you off because shut the up. I forgot what I was going to say. What is the left's obsession with children? Their obsession is transitioning them. What the like cooked and cooked. I pronounce you fucking cooked.
That's
together.
I have it together.
Yo, the obsession with the conservatives about other people's kids. If it is your child, it is your choice what you do with your kid.
Just to talk about someone who's at 16 and their level of consent in the state of California, from my understanding, someone who's 16 can also drop out of high school, which would severely affect their life. And they have access to that decision if they want to, because say they want to get into the job market or whatever their
But like you just said, it would severely affect their life. Severely was your word and your choice of word.
They have that option to make that choice at 16. I will agree with you that someone at 12, I'd be uncomfortable with somebody at 12 years old getting surgery completely, because there's still a lot of the world for them to learn about themselves, how to navigate it, et cetera, et cetera. But for us to have access to be able to drop out of high school if we wanted to and make...
Bless me. Sorry, it's all this bullshit.
Such a life-changing decision that could affect, I mean, you economically, socially, so many different ways. But then to say, you know what, you're not old enough to make this decision, for me, again, as somebody who was 16 and was in such a religious family and all the restrictions that I had, if I didn't have access to those things, I don't know if I would be here. And I've learned a lot through my transition and through my access. And
you hear a lot of doctors say, if you don't transition your child, they will kill themselves. So it's like a dead child or a trans child. And that's just blackmail. It's honestly just blackmail. Don't trust the doctors that say that. It's blackmail. They have an agenda.
Through my transition and through my access. And I even grew up in the wild, wild west where everything was still on YouTube and we didn't really even have medical providers really even giving us guidance, and especially trans men. So I find it rather uncomfortable that we're able to make a 16-year-old be able to make that type of decision. An 18-year-old is allowed to go into service, but for some reason we can't give that same access to a kid to have that consciousness. Because I can tell you at 16, I knew who I was. I'm not at 12, not at 14, but 16, there's a certain level of consciousness and experience that you've experienced in society that you understand the pocket you fit in.
But just because other bad things happen doesn't mean that that is okay. It's like, so just because they can drop out of school means they should be able to cut their breasts off?
Okay, this is probably the last section of this video that I'll watch, but this is a good topic. Non-binary should not be considered under the trans umbrella, 100%. They're not trans. They're not trying to be trans.
Should not be considered under the trans umbrella.
Let's go, girl.
This is evil.
I think that the concept of a transgender umbrella is inherently an issue, right? Because when you're talking about something as nuanced, complex, full of social dynamics, medical dynamics, so many things to be considered. When you're talking about a transsexual, you should really be specific, right? And this entire concept actually of transgender is relatively new. Like, it came about in the 70s or 80s through queer theory, when originally it was about transsexuals, which was considered a medical diagnosis, which was a medical process, and it defined something very specific. So for me, when I hear that non-binary, which, if I'm to understand correctly, means
I think
that
androgynous.
Right, and it means you identify somewhere.
You know what? Being androgynous is completely fine, but you know what fucking sex you are. You know what sex you are. If you're a man who looks like a woman and a man at the same time, you're a man. And if you're a woman who looks mannish or like masculine, and you also look a bit more feminine, but you're sort of in between, you're androgynous, but you're a woman. The sex you were born is the sex you were born. Intersex is a medical condition. People who like to throw like, oh, there's people who's intersex who like they are like, it's like, no, that's a medical condition and that's the outlier from what they're supposed to be. That's a genetic anomaly. So you're either born male or you're born female, and being born intersex is an outlier. It's not a common occurrence. And it is something that is a medical issue. It's not a gender identity. It's not a personality. It is something that they have to deal with. And I have empathy for them. And you know what? If they wanted to like call themselves non-binary, I would 100% be on board with that. If they wanted to be they, them, no worries. I'll call you they, them. But we're not going to be calling people who are a man or people who are a woman non-binary. You know what? That's offensive to people who are intersex.
Where in between male and female, that's not what a transsexual is.
The definition of a trans person is somebody whose body has been altered, or somebody who identifies as a different gender whose body has been altered via hormones or surgery.
And there's two genders, so if you want to say, you identify as a different gender, it has to be one of those two, which would make you a transsexual if you're actually trans. I think it makes about as much sense as saying that bisexual is under the straight umbrella. It's like, no, that's a separate thing. And I think there's beauty in being separate things. There's beauty in having your own lanes. And my concern is there's so much, clearly, as we see today, really heated conversations about trans people that when you start adding in queer theory, non-binary, it just makes it muddy, and the people at home, don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Here's the thing about a lot of the people who identify as non-binary, so to speak. When they do so, they typically don't medically transition. Right. And when you do so...
It's called laziness. It's not really what you want. You want to sort of just different, and you're lazy. You get off on making people feel uncomfortable. You get off on all of that. That's what you are. Go enjoy yourself in your little circle by yourself in your echo chamber, because that's where you belong. You belong in a little box, and put yourself in a box, wrap yourself up and send yourself to yourself, because that's the only person that really should be indulging your own behavior, because no one else should have to put up with your bullshit.
At that point, it's a costume.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's gender nonconformity, right? And so
because they can take this off, I can't take this off.
Yeah, as Blair's saying, we look at gender nonconformity, which used to be okay. You can wear what you want, you can present however you want, but it doesn't make you something different. You can't, as Blair was saying, it comes out of queer theory, which is postmodern neo-Marxism, which means that there's no such thing as absolute truth. They don't believe there's truth, so it kind of erodes the structure of society. And it's actually really regressive in a lot of ways, because you end up getting it to where it's literally based off of stereotypes, which we've tried to for so long get rid of. Like, it's okay to be gender nonconforming male or gender nonconforming female, and that didn't make you non-binary. It didn't make you trans.
When I meet a trans person, right, like a trans woman, a trans man, there is an inherent camaraderie. Like when you mentioned, I can't take this off, part of me almost got a little bit emotional. I know it's hard to believe people think I have emotions, but I really do. And because I saw you in that moment, and I said, you know what, we are similar in that way. We may be different in other ways. We don't know each other very well, but we have that. When I talk to or I'm around a non-binary person, it doesn't really click, it doesn't connect, because it is so different. So I think that's inherently, I should be able to see some semblance of my own issue within that person, and I don't when they're non-binary at all.
And so I have no issue with non-binary people. I just don't think that we're the same.
Yes.
I kind of faced this like thing once when I was at work, where I used to work. I remember, in fact, now that I think about it, it's a bit dodgy of my manager to have done this. But my manager at the time, she came up to me and she's like, "Oh, such and such is just got on hormones," and I was like, "Oh, I didn't even know they were trans. I thought they just like to be androgynous, because I thought they were just an androgynous person. They wore dresses, but nothing like off-putting. They look just androgynous." But then when I went to them and I was like, "Oh, hey, I heard that you're on hormones. That's so exciting. I didn't know you were transitioning." And then I said she a couple of times, and they were like, "Excuse me, I'm non-binary." And I was like, oh, all these all this what they were talking about, this fellowship, this camaraderie, that disappeared very quickly. And I was like, "Oh, what are you doing? You're just castrating yourself for the fun of it. Interesting life choice." 4910.
And so when like I was saying before, like when our acceptance rate has completely been destroyed because these people are initiating violence in our name, they're gonna self-ID out of the category, and then we're gonna be the ones left holding the bag.
Yeah, it's
Whoa, that is so true. Oh my god, that is so true. They're gonna self-ID out of the category. That is like so true.
if sex is a binary and you're neither of those, then you're not trans.
Hello.
That one.
I think it would be really hard for a cis person to truly imagine what it's like to be trans.
Also, I hate the word cis. You're a woman, or you're a man, or you're a trans woman, and you're a trans man. There's nothing wrong with being a trans woman and being a trans man. There's something wrong with people who like to go, oh, that's a cis woman, oh, that's a cis man. No, cis, that's a man and that's a woman. That's all they are. And then you have a trans woman and a trans man. Keep it simple. And stop using the terminology that comes from the Nazis. Seriously. Like, it's just chat. I'm gonna be honest.
And what it's like to live with that and be born that way. And I'm not non-binary, and so I really cannot picture what it would, because I'm a binary trans person. I can't imagine what it's like to be in between that. But just like how the cis person can't really truly understand that, it doesn't mean that it's not a thing and it's not real. And I really believe that we have like 85 years like on this earth, and like so many people spend so much time being like sad and uncomfortable in their bodies. And if we were just all comfortable, like if somebody like wants to go by a name and like dress a certain way and they are saying, this makes me so comfortable, this is what makes me happy, there is no reason they shouldn't do that. And my God, there is no reason why we should say, well, you're not a part of this because like this is us and like this is whatever. Because literally like we could all sit here and agree that like non-binary people are like not a part of the trans community or whatever, which is not my opinion. But we could like, that doesn't like change anything. Like we have a vast community. And I believe that non-binary people are a part of the community because I have so many shared experiences with so many non-binary people I know. We have very similar experiences in growing up with dysphoria, with transition, with anything, and nobody has to do anything. Nobody has to transition in a way they don't want to transition. And yeah, like let's be a happy family. My God, let's all just be happy. That's my vibe.
Yeah, or fight the fight together.
Yeah, like let's do
honestly,
it.
Like
we have separate fights though. That's the thing.
No, we
I don't know if it is.
We're weakening our borders by creating this divide within our own community. This is so silly. Look, I actually understand like a lot of the points that are being made here from the conservative side because I grew up conservative. I voted when I was 18. I voted for fucking Bush. Yo.
Damn, girl.
Like I was conservative. Okay.
So we're the same age.
So it was not until my later age that I kind of decided, like, you know what? Let me be more open to different types of communication, different types of people. I actually talked so much shit about pronouns. Like when it first started really coming out, I did not agree with it. I was like, what is this? This is stupid. How can you be a them? Blah, 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 blah.
You were
and
correct.
I did the whole thing, the grammatically. You're interrupting me.
But you were correct. I'm just saying. I'm agreeing with you.
They asked you not to comment, and you're commenting. So if you could stop, that would be great.
Well,
Thank you. So anyway, as I was saying, so I changed my mind because I got to spend time around other people who were non-binary, who were non-conforming, and I got to speak with them, and I got to experience their life and their experiences. And then I realized myself, I'm like, shit, maybe this is what I've been experiencing my whole life.
That's the woke ideology in action. That's what that is.
Only because I was exposed to it. If I would have never been exposed to it, I would have never known that this could have been my experience. And I would have lived the rest of my life as a different person, as somebody who I'm not.
Oh my God, this is the woke ideology mind virus in action. Literally, is like he's so close to reality. He's so close to understanding that he's been indoctrinated, but he's just yet so far. He just can't see that he's been indoctrinated. But he's narrating it like he knows, but he just doesn't. He's so unaware. It's so funny.
And it's funny that some people keep talking about, oh, you need to go through HRT, you need to have surgeries in order to be trans. That is all garbage.
Another thing I never said. It's just so crazy.
Again,
I did.
You're still
But you
interrupting
do.
me while I'm talking. This is the second time now.
You're addressing me.
This is the second time now.
If you can claim someone said something they didn't say, they should be able to correct you in the moment.
Do you feel good now that you said what you needed to say?
I feel fine.
I mean, I do. I don't know about Leia.
Wonderful.
I'm sitting pretty. I'm fine.
So, I mean, sometimes it's like the power that needs to hold me back.
I mean, you're
because
appropriating.
That's the masculine energy in him. He's like, needs to hold himself back. Like, somebody stop me from fighting. Yeah, that's the man in him. Oh wait, he's a man.
I exist. I am proof that non-binary people exist and that it is a thing. And because I'm sitting right here in front of all of you, I'm a real person. This is my experience, just as yours is the trans experience. That as a trans woman, as a trans man, or as whatever. But I'm not here to belittle your experience or to
Your presence does that for us. Thank you very much.
tell you that you don't exist. And that's the difference between you and I, that you're trying to cancel you. And when I say you, I'm talking about conservatives. And maybe it is you. You're part of the thing. You're part of the thing.
Here's where I get to interject because there's a lot of things said about me.
Stop addressing her and just talk to everybody.
But what is your dysphoria?
Well, there was something. Okay. So another complete, I don't want to say the word lie, but I guess that's what it is about what I've said here, right? I never said you don't exist.
I do, and I stand by it. You don't exist. Well, at least your personality doesn't. Personality is your gender. So you should go get a personality because your gender can't be your personality, but that's what you've managed to do somehow.
We can add that to the long list of things y'all have said, I've said that I didn't. We know you exist. You're here. You're not fictitious, right? My point is you're different than.
He looks fictitious. He looks very fictitious.
But yet when I say it, it's an issue, right? The same way that he said he can't take that off, you can, right? It's different. At the very least, it's different. And when we have a community that there are so many categories, demi-girl, demi-boy, astrosexual, all this shit, but y'all can't fathom that maybe that would be a different category than what I am when we have such different, as you keep saying, and everyone keeps saying, experiences? It doesn't make sense. A bisexual is different than a gay man.
Can I ask a question? I just actually want to ask you a question. What is your dysphoria, though? Because gender dysphoria, or sex dysphoria, as I would rather call it, is an uncomfortability between my secondary sex characteristics, not just what I wear on a daily basis, because masculinity and femininity doesn't have anything to do with being trans.
But that's not true. But that is not true. You can have dysphoria without having to be dysphoric about your sex parts.
That is literally what it is.
What is your
You
dysphoria?
can have
What
dysphoria
is
about
your
anything.
dysphoria?
Straight cis women have dysphoria about their breasts all the time. They get breast augmentation.
not dysphoria.
That doesn't mean that I'm not dysphoric about certain things. That doesn't mean that. And you don't know my life. You're not in my life daily.
I can tell you your life is so two-dimensional. You're like so surface level. You're like a narcissist whose entire world is just outside of their head. It's literally, their entire world is literally who they can sort of like bring into their circle, get their narcissistic energy like from. Who can they drain?
You don't know what I
cannot-
experience, the different things that I experience personally.
I cannot believe that I grew up as, this 5-year-old little kid experiencing just crippling gender dysphoria, like horrible thoughts, struggled so much my entire life to be sitting in this room and you're explaining to her what dysphoria is.
I have my experience. It
It's
doesn't mean that I didn't
amazing.
have crippling.
You got a different
It
experience.
doesn't mean
You
that
got a
I
different
fucked up.
We all have a different. We all have a
We all have
different
different experiences.
Which makes us different.
I know, but we're all both not.
It's okay,
Different
y'all.
things. That's it. It's that simple.
We don't identify as our gender at birth.
Obviously, I'm not a non-binary person, so I can't speak for non-binary people, but I can talk about what I've been taught by non-binary people. From what I understand.
Do you notice her wig's just a little bit off center? I don't know. And it's just a little bit forward. She's trying to hide that 5 head.
Non-binary people, sometimes they have to go into the gender binary for safety reasons, depending on the environment that they're in. A non-binary person stepping into this world and dismissing the gender norms of what people think a man and a woman is supposed to be like is so powerful. If you don't want to be mutable to the times of the expansion of the trans and non-binary experience, then just say that. I would rather you just say that you are not willing to move forward, learn the new terminology, learn the new pronouns that come with the trans umbrella and the trans experience for the most part. And also, I'm sorry, one more thing. And also, too, there are non-binary people who have different sexual orientations. Let's also name that, too. There are so many layers of nuance that we could really get to when it comes down to the...
But we're not getting to the... Well, you're not getting to the root of anything. You're literally just sort of like... You're doing a Kamala. You're chucking a word salad.
What's the definition?
That doesn't make them trans.
My big thing when it comes to, I agree with a lot of the things that you just said. I actually love you. I adore you.
Oh, thank you. Right back at you.
But here's the thing, right? That's not the prompt. The prompt was, is it different? And it is. Again, when I go out, I can't like take my beard off, girl. It's not coming off.
Right.
Unfortunately, as much as I hate having facial hair despite being a guy, like
Real.
it. Yeah. Like I can't go and reshape my body. I can't go and shave my Adam's apple down. I've been on this since I was 15. What if it had gone wrong?
So I have an interesting experience with non-binary myself, as someone who has presented as a binary trans man. I also don't take testosterone. So for me, especially throughout my transition, I took testosterone for a short period of time just to get the beard and the aesthetics that I wanted to in my transition. And once I reached those goals, I personally didn't want to lose my access to being able to give birth to a kid, especially with being with my wife for 17 years. We've been wanting to have kids, so I wanted to, have a backup uterus, so to speak. And in that process of doing that, I've discovered a lot about myself and my own identity of what is a man and what is a woman. And for me, when I take a look at the issue and the conversation, there's kind of two things happening. Simultaneously, our community is infighting with each other instead of looking outwardly at these structural systems that are actually truly affecting us with laws, politics, access to medical care, and et cetera. While simultaneously, we see that the idea of fitting into the patriarchal structures, the misogyny, everything that is kind of placed in us, I don't subscribe to that. I mean, all my life have been breaking the rules of what a gender ideology is just by my pure existence. I didn't grow up with the idea of knowing what trans was my entire life. I discovered that actually being homeless. I didn't discover that through some collegiate access to college.
Sounds like a cult got you when you were most vulnerable, I'm going to be honest.
Or influence from others. There was no one around me that knew or that I knew it was trans. I discovered that myself. But as I've aged in my transition, because I've been trans for damn near almost 20 years now, I've discovered my own fluidity in that area because I actually enjoy my female side too.
Okay. So those were my opinions on the trans conservatives and the trans liberal Jubilee middle ground video today. If you liked what you just watched, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn on notification bell to make sure that you're notified when my videos do come out. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate all the support.